Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.
So yeah, well, let's go on a bit more about what happened with Qantas. The interesting thing about what happened with Qantas, obviously they had this direction where they lost the trial, they lost the case, they put all those people off, laid them all off, and that was deemed illegal in court. But a few other things have been coming to light recently as well, which affect not just Alan Joyce and the current leadership of Qantas, but also Anthony Albanese. So obviously we had the issue with Qatar that were trying to, they were wanting to bring in more flights, more international flights, and what was it? The government put the kibosh on that. So we'll go through this article here and just talking about what actually happened and why it happened. So Senate inquiry to investigate government's decision to block more Qatar Airways flights. The more I've looked into it, you'll see different articles come up. It seems like the government was actually pro more Qatar flights, and then a few ex Qantas executives came on board into the government and had the ear of I think it was Albanese or maybe a few other politicians, and next minute everything's changed, and no, Qatar shouldn't be flying here. Anyway, so a parliamentary inquiry will probe the Fed government's decision to block a number of Qatar Airways flights into Oz after an opposition motion to establish the inquiry squeaked through the Senate by a single vote. The inquiry will examine the government's actions relating to any proposals received in the past 12 months for additional services to Australia's major airports, potentially setting a scope well beyond the Qatar Airways decision. The inquiry's committee will comprise 3 opposition members, blah, blah, blah. Shadow Transport Minister Bridget McKenzie has accused the government of stifling competition with this decision to ban 21 additional Qatar airline flights into Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. Calling for the inquiry's establishment on Monday. So, yeah, there was evidence to suggest the government was running a protection racket for the most complained about company in this country. The government says the decision was made in the national interest. What a load of rubbish. PM Elbow on Tuesday came under fire during question time over his relationship with Alan Joyce. Hey, so there he is. Elbow with Alan Joyce, looking very, very friendly and warm indeed. Elbow gave a one-word answer. No, when asked by Lib MP Bert Van Manen if he had any conversation with Mr. Joyce or other senior Qantas executives before making the Qatar Airways decision. He earlier told the Parliament he had met Mr. Joyce in response to a question from national MPs. Just gives the one anyway. The whole thing stinks. But a few other things have come up. In the Australian, they've reported that Albanese took our advice, says Qantas. The government's stance towards Qatar Airways changed after Alan Joyce made it known he was not happy. This is what Virgin's CEO told an inquiry. Qatar in the Daily Mail, they've slammed Albanese over the flight block and the government's decision to reject more flights. So we've got Alan Joyce making millions of dollars, doing things that are illegal, still walking away with this golden handshake, making millions of dollars. He's got this really good friend in Anthony Albanese, who it seems has supported Alan Joyce's desire to block Qatar. Okay, so it's a very, very dodgy friendship. But so the last piece that I want to talk about today, but still talking about going along the lines of Qantas and Albanese and the Labor government. I'll bring this story up. I think very interesting. And when you look at it, you've got, like I said, Dan Andrews leaving his state in hundreds of billions of dollars of debt. I think it's going to implode in a couple of years, maybe not even a couple of years. I think the whole thing's going to implode. They're going to end up in a lot of trouble. You know, their combined debt is more than New South Wales, Queensland, and Tasmania. It's more than the combined debt of New South Wales, Queensland, and Tasmania. Anyway, so you got that debt, you got all the shonky deals that Qantas were doing, laying off staff, selling tickets to flights that weren't even flying anymore. You got Ellen Joyce walking away with was it $20 million whatever golden handshake. You've got decisions made by the government which stifle competition but support Qantas. And then you also had have this little piece going on. The Aviation Consumer Advocate is meant to help Australians with airline complaints, but it's been called a shonky imposter. This is very, very interesting, I think, because it shows, it really does show the relationship between Albanese and Qantas and Alan Joyce, but also, you know, this ability that our governments have to be blaming others, blaming previous governments, blaming everyone else. But when you look back over the whole thing, as you'll see here, they themselves are the ones. Here you go. I'll keep reading through. When a customer advocate is described as feckless and a dud and receives a Choice Shonky Award for doing such a bad job, it should be a clarion call to fix it. But 2 years after the Aviation Consumer Advocate was labelled a shonky imposter, things are finally heating up. In plain terms, the Airline Advocate is funded and run by the airlines. So this is where you go to make a complaint, I believe. It doesn't have the power to assess a complaint, to assess a complaint, make a decision, or reverse a decision. And it can't order refunds or compensation. As Choice's Rosie Thomas says, the Aviation Consumer Advocate works like a post box, forwarding complaints to the airlines without any power to make decisions or complaints. How ridiculous. But this isn't the worst of it. So they said that's toothless, you know, it's pointless. Now, this person here, in a statement to the ABC, spokesperson said, we've known for a long time that it is a dud, but the previous Liberal and national government failed to do any policy work in this space at all. We inherited a mess, but are working hard to fix it. So you're reading this article so far thinking, oh, it's the Libs. Yep, those flipping Libs and Nationals. You can't trust them. What did they do? But how's this? The ACA, the Aviation Consumer Advocate, was established in 2012. Think, oh, 2012, that's a while ago. Funny, because I didn't think the Libs were in government then. Shortly after Qantas's controversial October 2011 decision to ground its entire fleet, leaving tens of thousands of customers stranded all over the world to break a deadlock with unions, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese launched it back when he was Transport Minister, touting it in a press release as Australia's first airline advocate. So there you go. We're blaming, hey, this isn't our fault. We inherited this mess from the Libs and the Nationals. What are we going to do? We're just trying to fix up their mess. But lo and behold, Elbow, good friend of the other fella, he's the one that launched it in the first place. And it's literally just a post office box. You just get the complaints and you fast forward it to the airlines. And you hope that maybe, so it makes you look good. I mean, you can't do anything wrong, really. You just put out your report saying, look at all these complaints that we handled. And look, oh, they've been dealt with one way or another. They've got a response. But literally, they're getting all this funding to do things, and all they're doing is receiving the complaint and forwarding on the complaint for someone else to deal with, for the airline to deal with the complaints about the airline. Reminds me of police getting complaints and then other police investigating complaints about their friends in the police. Anyway, so they're getting the complaints, they're receiving complaints, they're dealing with complaints themselves, and then Labor saying, hey, it's not our fault. This is a feckless, toothless instrument. What are we supposed to do about it? It's the Libs' fault. But please overlook the fact that we actually set up this whole thing. And the Prime Minister, current Prime Minister, good friend of Mr. Joyce's, he's the one that set it up. Wow. The last couple of years has seen, I think, a dramatic rise in corruption in Australia. All these Labor governments, state governments, and now our federal governments, which seem to just trample over the Australian citizen, over the people that actually vote for them. And so many of them now do a Dan Andrews and just say, well, I don't agree with that. Oh, that's the findings. The findings are against me. Well, I don't agree with it. So tough. Who cares? We'll just move on, not answer any questions. We keep spending the Australian money, keep running ourselves into debt. They're running us into the ground. We have so many issues with corruption, so many issues that we've got to deal with. And they keep feeding the economy by just bringing people in from other countries, allowing immigration, just opening the taps and allowing immigration in full force, while not dealing with the issues that we have on the ground, like homelessness, like with people who live here and are born here, struggling to buy a house, struggling to find a place to live, struggling to rent. And yet Alan Joyce walks away with $20 million. Dan Andrews walks away with a $300,000 a year pension for life, which his government, by the way, was the ones that brought that in, that pension for life, $300,000 a year for him. Give him $300,000 a year while the state is will be well over $200 billion in debt. Albanese paving a way for Qantas to do its dirty deals. And Australian population just continues to vote for these people. As long as they keep just handing out the money and not making people work for the things we have, our population just keeps voting for Labor. It's not just Labor. The Libs aren't much better. We're in a mess. Victoria's in a mess. Our federal Labor government are, I think, as corrupt as you'll ever find. I think we as a nation are heading for a world of hurt when it comes to our national debt and our state debts. And we need to hold our politicians and their parties more accountable. They can't just keep going and doing these things. It's not just reckless, it's unlawful. But we're being sold down the river to the likes of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. Anyway, that's just my opinion. You let me know what you think. Please leave a respectful comment. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope.
They just fuel a desire that will take me higher. I'm on fire.